My name's Nicolas Cole. I'm one of the highest paid ghostwriters in the world, and today I want to walk you through 12 different email sequences that you can build and sell to every single client on the planet. Doesn't matter if they sell physical products, digital products, services, enterprise technology, software. In some capacity, every business needs these 12 different sequences. And the reason that I wanted to make a video on this is because I have done a lot of consulting over the past 10 years. I've gotten to see inside a lot of different companies, inside a lot of different types of industries. I've ghostwritten for more than 300 different founders and C-level executives and inside their businesses. And so I've gotten to see a lot. And the vast majority of companies don't even have one or two of these, let alone all 12. And so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for you as an email ghostwriter. Very similar if you're an email copywriter. A lot of these skills are very similar. But these sequences are things that every single business needs. And a lot of writers don't know that, and they don't know that there are this many opportunities inside email. So I want to walk you through each one and explain what it does and how much you can charge for it. So the first one is what's called an educational email course. So this is usually like a 5, 7, 10-day front-end offer where you basically say, over the next 5 days, I'm going to walk you through XYZ. I'm going to teach you this thing. I'm going to help you solve this problem, whatever the offer is. Just type in your email. And the reason that educational email courses work so well is because it's a very tangible promise for the person putting in their email. It's very different than saying, hey, subscribe to my newsletter. When you say subscribe to my newsletter, that's a very open-ended offer, and you're not really promising the person typing in their email anything tangible. You're just saying, type in your email and let me hit you up when I want to, right? You will capture way more emails. This is the thing that a lot of companies don't understand, is that you will capture a lot more emails when you make that free opt-in a valuable and tangible offer. And I use the word tangible because the whole key is saying, I'm going to give you this specific thing. I'm going to help you solve this specific problem. And so an educational email course is one of the most effective ways to capture leads into your business, right? And so we drink our own Kool-Aid. For all of our different business verticals, we have an educational email course. StartWritingOnline.com, that's an educational email course that feeds into our beginner writing program, Ship 30 for 30. We have an educational email course called our Premium Ghostwriting Blueprint. That feeds into our Premium Ghostwriting Academy. We have one that feeds into our paid newsletter, Write with AI. We have found that educational email courses have the best opt-in rate. You know, some of these pages have an opt-in rate of upwards of 50, 60, 70%, depending on where the traffic's coming from, if it's warm traffic, okay? So you can build these educational email courses for just about any company because they all need education, right? Every single company that's trying to sell something wants to and needs to educate the customer. A lot of people think that, sales is all about sales. No. Sales is all about education. And the reason that most people don't buy something isn't because they're not like sold on it. They don't buy it because they don't understand some component of it. So that's why I'm such a big believer in leading with free education. And you can sell one of these educational email courses for $5,000. You can sell it for $6,000. You can sell it for $7,000. You can sell it for $10,000 or $15,000. This is the beauty of selling a packaged asset, is when you're not selling your effort, or you're not selling the time it took you to create it. That's, a lot of writers, they charge per hour or per word or something like that. They're selling effort. And when you're selling an asset, well, the price of that asset is essentially whatever you want it to be. And I'm not just making this up. Like, I have sold this asset for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and I have trained hundreds of other ghostwriters to do the same. And I see everybody offering the same service, but at different price points. And the only difference between why someone charges $5,000 versus $7,000, it almost always comes down to that person's level of confidence and their ability to even ask for the number. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's worth $5,000 or $7,000. It comes down to whether or not they feel comfortable asking for that, okay? And so this is an incredible service to provide, and it's a great way to get your foot in the door with companies, because if you can help them build a high value opt-in, then it unlocks all these other opportunities. There's all these other things that you can help them build inside email once they have this front end offer, okay? So here's what happens, right? Now, once you have this, here's all the things on the back end of that you can help them build. The second is an Evergreen newsletter. So there's actually different ways of executing a newsletter. And an Evergreen newsletter basically means that the way you set it up in an email system. So for example, if you use ConvertKit, it's now called Kit. If you use Beehive, whatever system, if you use MailChimp, doesn't really matter. An evergreen newsletter is where every time you write a newsletter, it stacks into the same sequence. So when someone types in their email and gets subscribed to the newsletter, they aren't receiving the most recent newsletter that you published. They are starting back at the top of the sequence just like everyone else. Now you might be asking, why would you want to do that? Well, there's two big reasons why an evergreen newsletter is really effective. The first is, wouldn't you want every single person who enters your email list to read your best newsletters first? The answer is yes, right? So when it's not structured as an evergreen newsletter, they're getting the most recent one. And for some newsletters, this makes a lot of sense, right? Like for news, that makes sense. If you were to type in your email to the New York Times newsletter and it was giving you news from 5 years ago, you would be like, what the hell, right? But for the vast majority of just education types of, not even businesses, but emails or newsletters that are sharing education, usually that in some way leans more timeless than timely, it makes a lot of sense to use this evergreen structure, because then what you can do is you can front load the sequence with your highest performing emails. So that means every new person who enters, they go through the same first 10 emails, right? So you want to front load all of the value. The second reason why these evergreen newsletters are so effective is because after a year, right, you have however many, you have 52 weekly newsletters already queued up, which then sort of takes the burden off of you of feeling like you constantly need to create new things, right? So the longer the evergreen sequence gets, the more that you go, oh, I can operate from a place of abundance because every person who subscribes starts back at the beginning. So having this evergreen newsletter is really, really effective. And here's where they pair together. If you were to build an educational email course for someone and you start helping them collect emails, well, you don't want them to just get to the end of the educational email course and then never hear from you again, right? The next logical step would be to move them into an evergreen newsletter and then continue to provide free value to them. And the way I like thinking about this evergreen newsletter is that it's essentially a compounding list of all these people that have their hands raised saying, I might be interested in being a customer at some point in the future. And so building this is one of the most valuable assets that a company can have. And so the reason I put this range of $3,000 to $10,000 per month for this evergreen newsletter is because it depends on how deep you want to go here and how advanced you want to get. So for example, if all you were doing was offering an evergreen newsletter, you go, I create one newsletter for your list every single week. So 4 per month. You could probably charge 3, 4, 5 grand-ish per month. I've charged more than that. I've charged less than that, right? It sort of depends on where you're at in your career, what you feel comfortable charging for, and also like who you're pitching and what the budget is for the client, right? But if you were just writing one weekly newsletter per week, so 4 per month for a client, you're in the 3 to 5 grand per month range. If they wanted to squeeze more juice out of their email list, what they would do is they would add in these 2 other emails. So the next 2 are having what's called an indirect email and then a direct pitch email. So the way that we have this structured inside our business, and this is what we educate other writers to do as well, you want to think about it like, and I'm going to use, just arbitrary days. You could have this on any day you want, but let's say on Mondays, we send a value first evergreen newsletter. So every Monday, it's just pure value. We just want to help you. We just want to keep making sure that everyone on our list hears from us and keeps learning from us, right? It just nurtures that list over time. Every Wednesday, though, we might want to ping the list again with something that is more of a blend of here's some value and here's like an indirect reference to one of our products or services, the thing that is our business, right? So this email, think of it like 50% newsletter, 50% pitch, but it's not really a hard pitch. It's more of like a, hey, and by the way, we have this thing over here. Okay. So that's what's called an indirect email. And then maybe every Friday, we want to just hit the list one more time with a direct pitch. It's like, hey, why haven't you done this thing? Why haven't you taken this action? Why haven't you signed up for this thing? Why haven't you joined us inside this program, right? It's just a direct pitch. These are usually very short emails, right? The newsletter is probably the longest one. It's probably in the ballpark of 800 to 1,500 words. The middle one, the indirect email, it's probably it could be a similar range, but it's probably on the shorter side, maybe like 1,000 words or less, 800 words or less. And then the Friday direct pitch is probably very short. It's probably 500 words or less. Okay. And so it sort of depends on the client. It depends on how much they're using their email list, how much they want to use their email list, what they're selling, etc. But these are different types of emails that you can build and help them create that squeeze more and more juice out of their email list. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Cole, this all makes sense in theory, but if you send that many emails, isn't everyone just going to unsubscribe? And we have a mantra that we say in our company, and we've yet to find a situation where it's not true. The mantra is, if you send more emails, you make more money. Every time we run internal analyses on our different businesses and our different verticals and our different funnels, every single time, whenever we send more emails, we make more money. Now, more people might unsubscribe, but if more people unsubscribe, but you also get more customers, then who cares? Because the people who were going to unsubscribe were probably going to unsubscribe anyway at some point, right? You just accelerated that. And if you're really curious, just search Nicolas Cole 20 emails, ship 30 for 30 into Google. And I wrote up a whole analysis, I shared this publicly, where we looked at all of our sales from Ship 30 for 30 and how many emails on average it takes before someone converts. And it wasn't one email, it wasn't two emails, it was upwards of 20 emails. We have all that data inside ConvertKit. Okay, so it is a faulty belief thinking if I ping my list or the client's list this many times, people are going to unsubscribe. It's not true. And over again, we are humbled and we have to keep relearning. If you send more emails, you will make more money. Okay, so this is the way that we have our internal just Evergreen newsletter structured. We have the pure value, we have the indirect, and then we have a direct pitch. There's also some advanced things that you can do here where you could send the indirect email to a smaller subset of the list that maybe is more interested or has taken some sort of action in the past, right? That qualifies them on your list. And then you could make the direct pitch email, an even more specific list where it's like only the people that have taken these actions that are most primed to want to take the next step. So there's some advanced things you can do there, but I just wanted to flag these are different types of emails that you can write and you can help businesses with. Okay. The next one, so that was, the first one is educational email courses. The next three, 2, 3, and 4 are these different sorts of newsletter emails that you can write. Number 5 is, I call this, 4 clickers. So this is a testimonial or Q&A email sequence. So what this means is, and you can do this inside pretty much every email software platform at this point. So, in ConvertKit, in Beehive, MailChimp, whatever you're using, you can set tags where when someone clicks on a link, for example, or takes some sort of action, they get segmented to a different list. Now, why is that important? Well, for example, in our Ship 30 for 30 funnel, we have a bunch of people that come into our free educational email course. We have a bunch of people who open all of our emails, but the specific subset of people that we really want to follow up with the most are the people who click on a link inside of an email saying, why don't you come join us inside Ship 30 for 30? The reason that's important is because every time they click that link, they're basically raising their hand saying, I'm interested. I'm interested in at least learning, right? And so that person is a warmer lead than someone who doesn't ever click that link, right? So what you can do is you can create another sequence where 4 clickers, that's what we call it internally here, where when someone on a list has clicked, they get moved to a warmer list, and then you can send them different sorts of resources. And the 2 things that you really want to send that specific group of people are basically social proof or testimonials. It's like, hey, if you're considering it, by the way, all these other people considered it, they took the next step, look at them now, right? So some sort of social proof or testimonial and or Q&A. And really the purpose of this Q&A, it's like, what are the most common questions? I bet you're sitting there asking yourself, right? That sort of thing. Really, these questions are objections. So oftentimes when someone asks a question, it might be phrased as a question, but really it's an objection thinking, I don't think this is going to work for me, but it's phrased as a question like, I don't know, will this work for me? So what you want to do is inside this sequence, you could alternate and say, I'm going to send clickers a testimonial every Tuesday, and I'm going to send them a common question or objection and how we would respond to it every Friday. And so you can hit these warmer leads more and more and more often. Again, faulty belief, if I hit them up this many times, aren't they going to do the opposite and run away? Yeah, some will unsubscribe, but I guarantee you the more emails that you send, the more money you will make. So this is another really effective little sequence that you can build. Number 6 is an abandoned cart sequence, okay? So what this is depending on the platform that you're using to sell whatever it is that you're selling, this works especially good for physical products, but it also works for digital products. It's the same thing. Is when someone has gotten to the point of checkout, right? They're about to purchase. And then for whatever reason, they don't. Either they change their mind or they get distracted or they forgot, or their phone rang and they took a phone call. And then next thing you know, they couldn't even remember what they were doing in the first place, right? An abandoned cart sequence registers that they were at the 1 yard line, but then didn't end up buying. And you can put them into a different sequence that then goes, let me follow up with them for the next 5 days until they do, right? And some portion of people will have changed their mind and they won't buy, right? But this is a really great way to save another 10, 20, 30% of sales that just fell off at the last minute, okay? And so in this abandoned cart sequence, I like to think of this as, assume that at the 1 yard line, someone changed their mind. Now, maybe the first email, you don't assume that. You can just say, hey, I bet you got distracted. Just by the way, looks like you were about to purchase this, but you didn't. Just wanted to send you the link to complete the purchase one more time, right? That might be the first email. But if they don't take action then, you want to start speaking to objections or questions. And so then you can follow up with them each day for, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 days if you want thereafter. And you can say, hey, by the way, if you're wondering, will this specific product or the thing that you're buying, will it solve this problem? Well, yes, let me explain how. And by the way, here's a relevant case study that proves that. So building this sort of automated sequence is great because you get to follow up with all these leads that fell off at the 1 yard line, and you just continue the education process, and a portion of them will come around and decide to become customers and a portion of them won't. But one sequence, you build it, it runs forever, and it saves 20% of your sales, right? That's meaningful. And especially depending on the size of the business, that can have a huge impact. The next one is a book a call sequence. And if you notice, I'm putting a range next to each one of these in this Notion doc, for each service. Each individual sequence, you should just earmark at least $3,000, okay? If you're charging less than $3,000 for any of these individual sequences, you're undercharging. Should be at least $3,000, and then depending on any nuances, who you're working with, what the client is, how big the client is, what specific things they want tailored to them, right? You could charge $5,000 for a sequence. You could charge $6,000, $7,000 for a sequence, but bare minimum, you should be charging $3,000 per sequence, okay? And I would just encourage you to target 5. You should charge $5,000 for every single sequence that you build, because there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just the writing, right? It's understanding how it works. It's understanding the strategy. It's understanding the psychology of the customer. It's understanding how to plug it into the software. It's understanding how to set up the campaign, right? There's a lot of skills that go into this. So number 7, the next sequence is what's called a book a call sequence. So this is especially needed for service companies, okay, where you're selling something over the phone. Now, what is a book a call sequence? Well, what this means is there's a lot of steps that go into someone booking a call. And for the vast majority of service companies, and especially if they are like internet minded and digitally savvy in any way, the flow most likely looks like this. In some way, they join your newsletter. In some way, they're on your email list. And then there's a series of steps that you need them to take. The first step is usually some sort of qualification. So the qualification is fill out, usually it's like an application. Okay, so I'm going to write this out. So the first step is fill out an app. Okay, so what this does is you have potential customers fill out an application so that you can get a better sense of who the lead is, right? Because whenever you're scaling a company by taking sales calls, you're managing the bandwidth of your sales team. And so you don't want a bunch of unqualified leads showing up on the calendars of your salespeople, right? So you need some sort of mechanism to qualify those people to then understand, okay, well, who's worth taking a call with and who maybe we need to educate in a different way, or maybe we need a setter to follow up with them individually and figure out, if they're the right fit or if this is something that they can afford, etc. Okay, so the first step is fill out an app. The second step is after an app has been filled out and assuming that they're qualified, you want them to book a call. Now, it's not as simple as if someone fills out an application, 100% of them book a call. That's usually not what happens. What happens is someone fills out an application, and then even if they're qualified, they look at the calendar and they're like, you don't have any time slots available for me right now. And then they forget and they leave the window, they go back to TikTok, they forget, right? Or another person fills out an app and then at the last second gets cold feet and then they don't book a call. There's all sorts of reasons why someone doesn't book a call, okay? And so you have to understand from the perspective of the business, and this is where if you can educate companies on this, they are going to throw money at you because most people don't know this, including the business owners themselves, okay? There is a massive drop off and there's a leak, right? You are leaking money after someone fills out an application or after someone gives you their qualifications or you sort of weed through whether or not these leads are qualified to work with you for your service. And so you need to do a lot of work in order to fix that leak, right? And so what a book a call sequence is you basically have these different sequences set up where it's like if someone hasn't booked or filled out an app yet, you keep following up with them via email until they fill out an app. Once they fill out an app, you move them into the next sequence where you keep following up with them until they book a call, okay? And then once they book a call, this is the step 3, and I think, and then we go into the next one here, is you move them into a pre-call education sequence, okay? So this is number 8. So what this is, and if you've been a customer of anything, chances are you've been in this situation, right? Let's say you book a call with a company and you're like, oh, I'm really excited to chat, but my call isn't until next week, Tuesday. Well, that's a lot of time between now and next week, Tuesday. And so you don't want to just be sitting there waiting for this call to happen and the company's not communicating with you, right? Before the call, you probably are asking yourself a ton of questions. If it's, 5-7 days away, you're like, you start to overthink it. You're like, I don't know if this is for me, right? You start doing more research online and then you find something and you're like, you know what? I actually don't think this is going to solve my problem, right? If a call is 7 days away, 7 days is an eternity. So many things can happen, right? And oftentimes people will talk themselves out of taking action. So what does the company need to do? Well, this is another great opportunity where once someone books a call, you move them into the third sequence, which is a pre-call education sequence. And so what that does is it basically takes the number of days between, when they booked the call today and when their call is, and you start sending them educational emails. Like, hey, thanks. Think of it like a pre-boarding sequence. Like, hey, thanks so much for booking a call. We're so excited to chat with you. By the way, in advance, I encourage you to look through this, walkthrough guide of all of the things that we're going to cover on the call. Next day, hey, so excited for our upcoming call. I bet you're probably asking yourself a handful of questions. Wanted to just send over this little FAQ for you. Next day, hey, can't wait to talk to you on the phone, right? By the way, if you're not that familiar with our founder or, our company story, here's a quick video or YouTube interview or something. I really encourage you to watch it. It'll give you a lot of context on what we're about, and we're excited to chat. Every single day, you have the opportunity to continue educating the person before the call. And I am telling you, 99% of service companies on planet Earth don't have any of this. And so they just go, buy our service or book a call. And when you book a call, you get no confirmation, you get no pre-education, right? You might go check out a company 10 times and never get followed up with, hey, why haven't you filled out an application? Hey, you filled out an application. Why haven't you booked a call? So these 3 little sequences and 3 opportunities are really, really valuable. And this is where, so many people, entrepreneurs especially, like they sit there and they're like, how do I grow my business? How do I grow my business? And they think they need some big fancy strategy. Here's the strategy. Do all the basic fundamental things that every business should do. And the vast majority of people don't even have these basic sequences set up, but they want to go understand how to do this big fancy advanced marketing campaign. It doesn't matter. It's like even if you go do that, you're going to pour a bunch of water into a bucket with holes in it. So all of these sequences are where, imagine if every single sequence here lifted the revenue by 5%. Well, it seems like nothing until you add up 5, 6, 7 sequences, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, just doing these basic things, we just added another 50% of revenue to our business, right? So it's very meaningful. So those three go together, all right? Sequence number 9 is what's called a hammer them sequence. So I didn't come up with this. This is sort of conventional wisdom in the internet marketing world, but this is the terminology that we've adopted and how we refer to it. So a hammer them sequence is where, I think I learned this from Jeremy Haynes, I think is his name. Want to give him credit for it. So a hammer them sequence is where if you're running cold traffic means you're tapping into larger and larger potential markets of people who really have no idea who you are, right? The more cold the audience, the less they know anything about you. And so if you have a business that's completely built on organic, you probably don't need to go as hard with something like this. You might not even need it at all. But the more that you start to experiment with paid ads and cold markets, like the colder and colder the lead, what you're trying to do is you're trying to accelerate the relationship that you have with that person. So when someone that's super cold, like they have no idea who you are, they saw your ad and now they're in your ecosystem. The hammer them sequence is basically you send them upwards of 3 to 5 emails a day for a compressed period of time, a week, 10 days, whatever it is. And especially if it's leading up to some sort of call. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to compress like a year's worth of someone following you on social and being in your organics ecosystem. And you're trying to compress that into 10 days to take someone from cold to warm. So a hammer them sequence, and it's primarily education, but all education in some way ends up being about dismantling faulty beliefs and overcoming objections. So there is a sales component to it, but I like thinking about it more through the lens of education. So this might mean proactively answering questions that they probably have, or faulty beliefs that they probably have, keeping them from taking action, or saying, hey, here's a really great episode, podcast episode that our founder was on. I encourage you to give it a listen. Here's a great YouTube video that Cole here created. I think it would be really helpful if you watched it. It'll help you better understand the opportunity that we're going to talk to you about, right? You're trying to front load as much education as possible. And considering, why is this such a valuable sequence? The vast majority of businesses do not have an organic component. So organic might seem like the popular thing, but it's not. The vast majority of businesses live and die off of cold traffic through paid ads, okay? And so the biggest problem with cold traffic is a lack of education. These people enter the ecosystem and they have no idea who this company is, who the founder is, what they do, what they stand for, what problem they solve, right? So think about all the questions they have before they could even consider, well, should I buy this thing or should I work with this company? So having this little hammer them sequence is a really great way to take all these companies that are going after cold markets and compressing the relationship building of the company, the founder, and the lead. All right. So very, very effective strategy. Number 10 is having some sort of upsell sequence. So again, depends on what you're buying. This is very common in the world of physical products and digital products. So if you're about to buy a journal, for example, well, after you buy the journal, the company should probably follow up with you and say, hey, you know what would go great with that journal is actually this really amazing pen that we also have too, right? Or here's some bookmarks that you might also really enjoy. Or here's a journal satchel that you can put your journal in, right? There's all sorts of other things that companies want to sell. And the more things that a company can sell to a customer, the larger the lifetime value of that customer, right? So you would be shocked how many companies just have a website with all their products for sale and are just like, here you go, whatever you want to buy, not realizing that the best thing they could do to make more money wouldn't be to go find more new customers. It would be to follow up with all their existing customers and say, hey, do you want to also buy this thing over here? Okay. This is a whole concept that, a couple of years ago, I built a paid newsletter called Category Pirates with 2 other guys. And one of them, his name's Eddie Yoon. He wrote a book called Super Consumers. And this is the whole premise of that book, is that Most companies are so obsessed with finding net new customers that they don't realize that they would make so much more money just selling more things to their existing customers. And super consumers, as he calls them, super consumers are the subset of your customers that buy everything from you. And so their LTV is 5, 10, 20 times higher than the average customer. So why would you spend all these resources going after the next average customer who probably spends the least with you when you can just keep focusing on your super consumers and sell them more and more things? Okay. And so having basic upsell sequences is an amazing value add to companies. You'd be shocked how few people do it. I mean, it's so obvious, but nobody does it. Email sequence number 11 is a no close call follow-up / education sequence. So what this is, again, back to service companies, if you're a service company, you're taking a lot of sales calls. After those sales calls, a large portion of those people probably aren't going to buy, or they don't buy, right? Typical closing percentage on a sales call is anywhere from 20 to maybe 50% if the closer's really good and the offer's really good. But ballpark, you're probably looking at more like 10, 20, 30%, which means 70% of the people that you talk to don't end up buying from you, at least not on that first call. Does that mean you should never talk to them again? Of course not. All of the money, if I've learned one thing in business, all of the money is in the follow-up. Every time I'm coaching a writer or I'm talking to someone about their business and I ask them, what the problem is, and they're like, I can't get any clients, or I can't find any customers, or can't grow my business. One of the first questions I ask is, how often are you following up? And the answer is usually never. That's where all the money is, okay? And so it's unbelievable to me that you have these service companies that spend so much effort getting people on sales calls, but then they leak out 70% of their calls, which don't convert. And then they never talk to those people again. And in reality, what you can do is you can create a no close call follow-up sequence where if someone doesn't close on the call, you move them into a long-term follow-up sequence where you say, hey, I just wanted to send this over to you. I thought it would be a helpful resource. Best of luck, with your goals and what we talked about. Hey, we just had this really helpful video drop. I just wanted to send it over. I think it'll really help you. Hey, we just put out this report. I thought you would find it interesting, right? Just nonstop free value follow-up forever. And what this does, you have to think about this from the perspective of a business and really the perspective of a salesperson, okay? If someone is working in sales on a team in a service company, their entire livelihood is predicated on their list of potential leads, right? That's how they put food on the table. And so by helping them have more and more people that stay warm because you keep hearing from them, right? Having salespeople have more and more people that they can follow up with later increases the likelihood that not only the company makes more money, but they make more money, which means they're happier, which means they stay with the company more, which means the company grows, right? So this is another massive missed opportunity that I find most service companies don't do. It's like if the person doesn't close, they never talk to them again. In reality, if you followed up with them for another 2 or 3 months, they would probably convert. You just have to follow up with them. And a lot of it you can automate. And then the last email sequence is what's called a FOMO sequence. So you could do this for software, you could do this for digital products, you could do it for physical products, you could do it for running a promotion on services, it really doesn't matter. FOMO just stands for fear of missing out. And so for example, when we were running Ship 30 for 30 as a cohort-based program, what we would do is the week before the cohort would start, every time we were running a cohort, the week before the cohort would start, we would put our entire list into a FOMO sequence. And the FOMO sequence is basically just nonstop direct ask, why aren't you doing this? Here's all the proof why you should trust us. Whatever faulty belief you have, let me explain why that's not real. Any question that you have, let me answer it for you. It is just pure, like, take action or unsubscribe, okay? And once again, everyone's faulty belief is thinking, if I do this, my whole list is going to blow up and I'm going to piss a bunch of people off and no one's going to want to work with me. And that couldn't be further from the truth. That is just something that you've made up to procrastinate and prevent yourself from taking action. Because every single cohort, when we would run this FOMO sequence the week before, we would do the vast majority of our revenue for that cohort. So we would have a cohort open for 3 months and people could sign up, but then the cohort wouldn't start for 3 months from now, or 2 months from now, whatever it was. And then we'd generate some sales. And then that last week is when we would do 50%, 60% of our total revenue for that cohort. So FOMO sequences are incredibly effective for cohort-based businesses. They're extremely effective for product launches. If you have a big product launch coming up or a big product upgrade being released, you should push everyone on your email list through a FOMO sequence, right? And these could be 5 days, 10 days. Every year for Black Friday, we drop usually a big digital product. We might do a FOMO sequence that lasts for 2 weeks. I think this last one that we did last year was like 10 or 12 days. And so the first half was more like education and let us explain to you this opportunity. And then the second half was just pure, hey, you should join. Why haven't you taken action? I think you'd really like this, stuff like that. So all 12 of these sequences, everyone loves the idea of recurring revenue. Here's the thing about ghostwriting services or copywriting services. Just because these aren't recurring, each one of these would be one-off projects, doesn't mean that they don't make a ton of money. And the irony with recurring is that people assume, oh, well, if I sell a recurring service, that means that person pays me every single month for the rest of my life. No, nothing recurs forever. If you're selling a weekly newsletter, you're selling social content or whatever it is, the person reevaluates that purchasing decision every single month. So it recurs until they decide that it doesn't recur anymore. And I feel like there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for ghostwriters to educate themselves on how these different sequences work, because if you build one of these for a company, they're going to want you to build all 12. And that ends up being tens of thousands, sometimes north of $100,000, right? From one client. And so all you have to do is understand how all these pieces work together, get your foot in the door, just focus on building the first one. Just the first one, and I don't mean in order here, I mean the first one that they feel like would be the most helpful for them. If you talk to a client and they're like, you know what, we need a book a call sequence stat. Great, help them do that. But then educate them, hey, we could probably get more people into your ecosystem if we build you an educational email course. And hey, by the way, I think we can lift revenue if we go and build an abandoned cart sequence, right? Once your foot is in the door, you can educate companies on all these different types of sequences that you can help them build. And the reason that you can charge $3,000, $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 for these sequences is because they all have a direct impact on revenue. These are revenue critical assets, okay? So I wanted to make this video. I hope this is helpful. I think these are some of the best opportunities for email ghostwriters out there today. And I just wanted to show you what is possible, walk through the logic, why would a business need each one, and also how much you can charge for each sequence.